first part of our session will be led by myself, and then Katie and Steph will take over with a case study from Liverpool. So our session today is entitled Connecting the Dots, and we're looking at how software in particular can impact student wellbeing. Our talking points today are very much around the research and recommendations to begin with. I'll then introduce our solution, Student Life, that we have built to enable you to manage your student wellbeing processes at your university. And then we'll hand over to University of Liverpool before finally doing a Q&A right at the end. Throughout this session, please feel free to utilise the chat function if you do have any questions that you want to drop in throughout, and myself, Katie and Steph will pick those up at the end of the session. So just to begin with, just a bit about who we are, if you're not aware of us already. So we are the leading supplier of event management and student accommodation software to the higher education sector. And we provide innovative software to help university accommodation and conference teams deliver the best customer experience possible. And that's over the four main areas you can see on the screen right now through conferencing and events, student accommodation, which is what we're talking about today, catering, and also residential management too. We're also very proud that we have recently been ranked #1 by the APUC framework for student accommodation management, conference and events, hotel management, and other multifunctional systems also. Where we are across the globe, so our global community, where we are represented. So we are across 20 different countries in the world. We have recently just hit our 25-year in business milestone this year. And we do work with over 80% of the UK's universities as well. And with our customers, we help them manage over 180 million bed nights per year. So to move on to our first section around research and recommendations, I'm just going to start off by sharing some recent headlines we've seen over the last year in the news, which you may also be all too familiar with. So we're seeing a lot of headlines at the moment around data analytics targeting student support to enable you to have that early intervention process and enabling you to use that data to inform kind of your resources and your future ways of working. They're also noticing trends in particular between different student groups and different demographics between students. And there's also a huge push between the NHS and university teams to ensure that there is a stronger partnership with working with young adults under 25 to ensure that the wait lists are reduced and they can access support nice and early. There's also some further headlines which we are also way too familiar with, which is very sad, where we can see that there is a call for the communication and data sharing aspect of student support to be considered as well. So from this, the research that is going on in the sector at the moment. So we have the Office for Students who are finding that students struggle to navigate the services available to them and that those referrals, as I've just mentioned, is taking long and they are not made quick enough, with some wait times being up to 8 to 12 weeks long, which can be the equivalent of a term in their university life. The UK is then finding that effective liaison is essential, that universities cannot be the sole support for university students, and they further found that there is 3 times the number of students dropping out of university in recent years. We then look at UCAS, who in their report in 2021 found there's been a 450% increase in UK applicants sharing information about a mental health condition, and that's really important that they're declaring this at the point of application rather than further along in their university journey. And finally, we have Student Minds, who have recently found that 1 in 3 students they surveyed have found that their university experience has had a negative impact on their mental health. So what resources are we seeing at the moment? So we know that Office for Students have released £15 million in the 22-23 academic year to be distributed across HE providers to fund student mental health support, and especially focusing on those effective joint working partnerships between university support services and NHS mental health services. To build on that, the NHS have also dedicated £33 million to improve the accessibility of mental health services for young adults, and the NHS have committed to boost their offering to young people under 25 to ensure easier access and a better offer of support services. From the government, we've obviously recently seen the UK government appoint the student support champion Edward Peck to ensure that best practice can be recommended in supporting universities to have the right tools and expertise to spot the early signs to support students who need that extra support. And from a result of that, we are looking at student wellbeing and software platforms. So these are required to ensure universities have the tools to monitor and identify where a student requires support and enable you to intervene early, and also give you those data and insights into the volume and types of student support you are needing to produce. So some further recommendations. So the UK want to focus on prevention, looking at student mental health becoming a shared priority, and that's also across the institution. So thinking of a clear commitment from senior leaders and joined up thinking between both the academic staff and student services. And the Office for Students further emphasise their focus on data, so looking at the assessment of student and service need based on relevant data and published evidence. And we just found this diagram, which clearly shows the number of different teams that a student might come into contact with. And we found this really important to analyse and think, okay, from a student's perspective, thinking about where accommodation and campus support teams sit in their journey as a very important and pivotal team that they will come into contact with. Where else throughout that university journey, as they may depart halls in second and third year, would they need to go for that support and advice? So hopefully, I can't currently see my screen at the moment, but you may see a poll being popped in the chat from Sarah, which we'd really appreciate if you could take the time on this call to complete, just to look at how do you currently monitor your student wellbeing and how can you record that as well. So if you wouldn't mind taking a look in the chat and just completing that for us throughout this presentation, that would be really appreciated. So moving on to our student life, our solution. So we're really proud of Student Life, and we've built this specifically for and with HE customers. So we've worked with a significant interest group from our customer base to build this student wellbeing management platform. This platform gives you a complete picture of student wellbeing, and we're aiming to replace any paper or email-based methods to ensure that everything is in one place and you can have that holistic view of the student, as well as then giving you improved visibility between teams. So where a student may be talking to multiple teams, leaning back on that diagram I've just shown, thinking about how we can put all of that in one place so you can see the full picture of that student's wellbeing in one go, rather than the student having to repeat themselves or leaning back on email correspondence. We do know that communication is complex across institutions, and we are aware that there are multiple systems in use and that this can be a challenge. However, there is no single source of truth, and we want to be able to give you that ability to have these intelligent alerts and avoid that difficulty of reporting, where you can very seamlessly look into a system and see of the different types of incidents, cases, student support, resources that you are using to support your student body. So how do we achieve that? We look at communication. We want to build a full picture for you. We want to give you one location to record any wellbeing concerns or incidents and give you that access to a granular level. As I've said before, we know that there's difficulty in communications between institutions, so enabling you to provide that access to a granular level, you can control who sees what data. We want consistency, so being able to track all interactions, incidents, and create cases, you can ensure that best practice is maintained across your staff base. And you can assign tasks and actions to ensure the students receive the support they require. So that could be anything from an incident follow-up where they need to receive expert advice or guidance, and they can assign a task to that staff member that can provide that so they can clearly see the status of that student's progress. And choice. This system is flexible, so it's able to be used within your accommodation teams or across the wider university, and we've enabled you to configure this to your own terminology and operational procedures. And ultimately give you that certainty. Having access to those reporting tools, including your trends and analytics, can give you that data and insight into your student body and the student wellbeing management tools that you are needing to provide. You can then review and assess your resources and student needs at any point throughout the academic year and previous and future years to look at those trends and analyse how your student trends are moving forwards. So there's no one better place than to share what this looks like in real life than the University of Liverpool. So this is my time to hand over to Katie, who's going to begin their side of this presentation. So Katie, I will just provide you with your access. There we go. Over to you, Katie.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ali. Let me just get my mouse has decided to stop working. That's always really helpful when you're trying to take control. Here we go. So yeah, thanks, Ali, for that. That was really interesting insights. What was also quite interesting was I just had a nose at the poll responses and saw that a lot of people wanted more sort of interdepartmental communication around dealing with welfare incidents. And so we're going to definitely touch on that in this part of the presentation. So myself and Steph are just going to basically talk you through how we use student life at the University of Liverpool and how it has benefited the way that we support students within our accommodation. So just to set the scene, so you get an idea of what our setup is at the university. So we have 7 properties with just under 4,500 bedrooms and an additional 500 private provider rooms based with a couple of providers that we use close to the city centre and close to our campus. We try to provide round-the-clock care to our students, so that is 24-hour receptions in our halls of residence that are manned during the day by our halls management teams and then overnight by our security services who are based within our halls of residence. This is then backed up with our wardens and residential advisors who provide our pastoral support for our students. So each hall has its own warden who is very traditional, very senior academic member of staff, and they oversee a team of residential advisors who are generally more senior students who live in and amongst the residents to provide that on-call service overnight. So our RAs do deal with everything from sort of low-level things such as maybe a student feeling a bit homesick through to being our first responders for any incidents that may happen, and they are backed up by an amazing overnight crises team. So that is supported by our campus support services, which is our university security team as a whole, and then also a overnight crisis rota, which is an on-call rota set up between our senior leadership teams, ourselves within accommodation, and also our advice and guidance teams as well, to make sure that those people are supported. And then as well as that, across the university, we have a advice and guidance team. So these offer support to students from everything from mental health services to counselling services through to money advice and guidance to international support. And they're a real key team that we work with really closely in the university. The systems that we use to support our students are Kinetics and Student Life. So Kinetics is our accommodation management system. We've used it now for a long time, and we do everything from initial application through to seeing the student through to departure through Kinetics. And then we joined up to Student Life, I think 2 years ago now, to provide a space for us to record and support with incidents and welfare within our student accommodation. So to give a bit of background on what we used to use before Student Life, we used an in-house built system called RAIL, so that's Residential Advisor Incident Log. It sounds much more fancy than it actually was. It essentially pushed out emails for incidents. It was great for the initial incident response because the residential advisor or the halls team would submit their incident response, and that would go out to a distribution group based on the location. So it would go to the right people, but then there was no ability to actually follow up on that incident. So any communication between ourselves and advice and guidance, or between my accommodation team and the RA team, all had to be done by email, and we were obviously a bit concerned about this, one being that there was just no way to really make sure that we were joining up the dots. And then secondly, a real issue for us was GDPR, because it didn't take much for some very sensitive information to be passed out and potentially get into, by accident, given to somebody that probably shouldn't see that information. And so Student Life came along and really provided the solution for that, as you'll see on the next slide. So how we use Student Life. So there's 3 main categories of how we use it. So first and foremost is incident reporting. Those reports are created by our residential advisors, our wardens, our halls teams, and they are seen by a much wider reaching group of people. So our advice and guidance teams and also our accommodation teams all have access to this system to be able to actually pick up on any incidents that happen and are able to triage and react to those really quickly. To put it into perspective, over last year, we reported over 800 incidents with students. This is substantially higher than what we ever had with our previous reporting system. And so we definitely think that this system's been quite a benefit for actually being able to see what is going on with students. And then probably actually the largest and most important part of this system for us is the review side of it. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of teams who can see this information. And as I said previously, with the old system, we didn't have the ability to actually communicate effectively across the board and make sure that a student was being supported. And what we had found on a number of occasions previously was that either somebody else thought that that student was being picked up and was being supported somewhere else, but they weren't necessarily. So students were actually being kind of missed in terms of support and prevention. But then equally, the other side of that was that some students were maybe having 4 or 5 different touch points that weren't necessarily needed, and the student was feeling a bit sort of bombarded and overwhelmed really with the support that was being provided. And so being able to have this system where everything is in one place and with all of the teams being able to see it has really helped us actually coordinate our response to students. And I suppose that then ties into the action side of it. So within Student Life, each student has their own profile. And so every time an incident is reported, that sits within their profile. In the system as well, you can then create tasks, you can make notes, and all of these sit against that incident and also against the student. So what happens is you start to get a real clear understanding of all of the interaction that you've had with a student. And not only that, it also then shows you a much more holistic view of that student itself to see actually whether, although they might have only been involved in some reasonably sort of low level incidents, actually you can then see, is there any more support that's needed? Because suddenly you see, although it might just be a couple of low level incidents, actually there's been 5 of them. So does that student need any more support? And it gives you a real tool and insight into providing sort of early prevention for our support services. And yeah, it's given us the opportunity to actually provide that welfare support and be a bit more joined up with it. It also gives us an escalation route as well. So in addition to the sort of tasks and notes that you can put on, you can also then escalate your cases as well. So say there is something that is maybe recommended needs to go to a risk assessment panel or be looked at by academic compliance, we can then escalate this up to the senior management to make sure that it is then actioned and taken forward. And again, they can provide updates within the system. So again, we all know what is happening with that student and making sure they're supported. The other side of the system that this has really helped us with is actually our disciplinary management. So before Student Life, we were using spreadsheets and it was pretty awful, to be honest. It was really hard to update. There were so many people using the spreadsheets that everything just sort of got a bit messy and a bit confusing to follow. And I'm sure with quite a lot of you in the room, you also have to assist with compiling information for things like FOI requests. And we obviously get a lot of those around disciplinaries, especially sort of where fines are involved. And so actually using Student Life to manage this has been really helpful. It enables us essentially to manage the disciplinary process from start to finish, because the majority of those disciplinaries come off the back of incidents that we receive. And so it gives us then the platform to be able to see that through to the end and actually put an outcome against that student on Student Life. So again, it's fully reportable and auditable across the board. And then the final part I've kind of already covered is just around the follow-up part. So with Student Life, you can change the status of any of the incidents that you're dealing with. You can also escalate them into cases as well. And so you can actually create a caseload for a student. And through that, you can then set the incident or the case to completed or closed, or whether it needs further information into it. So it gives you a really clear and easy format to use to actually see what there is that still needs to be actioned. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand you over to Steph, who's going to talk a bit more about how it's practically used on a day-to-day basis.
Hi everyone. So as Katie said, I deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So this is basically my home where I live in Student Life, where I monitor and manage all the students in the accommodation. So I manage multiple buildings across the accommodation. So this is really useful for me to see where students are, where the problems are, where I've got issues, and basically where to go in the morning. So essentially the first part and the most important part of this is the notification. So every incident, anytime you go online and anyone logs any incident whatsoever, it will send me an email notification. Now it does this to the entire team, so that gives the whole team a reason to look at their email. It gives you a little notification in which it says that there's been an incident reported. It gives you the location, which is handy for me because I know where the incident has happened. And then it's split into categories. So we have either welfare, disciplinary, or just a general RA duties. So in the morning, I can have multiple emails. So they will have different reports from different areas. Every time there's an incident, a residential advisor overnight will report something, or if it's in the daytime, the customer service advisors also report on this as well. So it kind of keeps a really open view for the whole entire team. So in the morning, I can check my emails and I say I have 7 or 8. I mean, it wouldn't be wrong to say that sometimes I have about 15 incidents. It depends on what night it is. So I can have a quick brief through these and have a look at the categories and the locations. I can prioritize what needs to be happening today. So for instance, I can have a multiple RA duties with a nothing report. So we'll have a nothing to report, just to say that they've gone round, they've checked the site, there's been nothing's happened in the evening, mostly, as Katie says, for reporting purposes, so that we can look and see what nights we've had no incidents across the whole board. So it's quite useful to see sometimes. I mean, I'm sure everyone's in the same position now, but it's relatively quiet over January, so you know your rises and falls with your disciplinaries and your welfare concerns. So the main one that we do look out for is we have welfare, so we can have any kind of welfare incident, but our biggest one, our subcategory, is student in crisis. So that one to me is my first red flag, and I can see that quite clearly in my email. So I'll flick through each one, have a little look, see which one is the most important and prioritise that. From there, from the actual email, I can click in directly and it takes me straight to student life. I then log in and it will bring up that incident straight away. So it's really, really handy because there's no having to click through and find the incident. It will click on, and it gives me an instant reference number as well. So if I did need to search for it, I can go into the incident log and search for that. But you can search by the time, the date, the incident. So it's quite useful. So yeah, so once I've clicked into the incident, I can see the incident is open. So as soon as anyone reports any incident, its status changes straight to open. And then in this, it's got a description box. It's also handy because I can do this on my phone. So we now have a mobile link access to it, which is really useful. As I'm out and about, you can see incidents live. The description box also pops out, so you can imagine a description for an evening event is quite lengthy, to be fair, depending on what's happened and what the incident is and who's wrote it. So you can click the dialog box out, so it opens really big, so it's easy to read and get the gist of what has happened in the incident. And then within this, the RAs can report the students' names. So they can click into a search bar and they can add the students in. They can add as many students as they need to in. So if they've had a party and there's been 6 or 7 people involved, they can add them all in. Because it's useful to see if you always get them students that are always there but never involved. They're always the ones that we like to keep our eye on, so we can see them. So we can see what students are involved. I can see who's reported the incident, which is useful to know. So I know who's the person that was the contact, if there's any more information that needs to be raised. You can add photos to the report as well. So if there's any student damage or there's any big incidents that have happened, the RA can add photos to the actual report, so it's all there in that one incident log. And you can change the risk level. So if you need this to be escalated high, you can change the risk level straight to high. And then we know obviously that this is a high level risk. And as Katie said, this is viewed by multiple people. So advice and guidance will see it. I will see it, the warden will see it, and everybody else involved will be able to see what has happened, so we can all read the same incident. So within that, there is a notes section. So inside the notes section, you can add additional notes onto if there's any further information. So if I've come in and a student's gone to hospital and they've returned back to site, I can pop in a little note to say that they've returned back to site, and it allows someone to know that whoever it is now back and available. Advice and guidance, pop little notes in there, and they will let me know that they've escalated it to someone else, so someone will be in contact from the welfare team. And that to me is probably quite a big important one. as Katie said, the old system that we were using, it was emails back and forward. There wasn't very much consistency with it. And there's nothing worse than knowing that there's a welfare incident on your site and you don't know who's picking up. So you don't know who's picked up on it, who's been in contact with the students, how many times people have been in contact with the students. And I would go home all night thinking, did someone get in touch? Has someone been over there? You just don't know what has happened. So this is a really, really good reassuring point that when it's gone to the advice and guidance team, that they make a little note and say that they've picked up on this and they've seen this and they are aware of it, and this has been escalated to a counsellor. And they will write little notes to say, they won't obviously write confidential information on it, but they will write little notes to say that someone from support services has been in touch with the student and they've arranged an appointment, so that you know that that student is receiving extra care. But also, as we said before, it allows not everyone to intervene. Sometimes there's times when not everybody really needs to intervene. It can be a bit overkill, so you know exactly who is intervening. So it's quite a useful tool, the notes. So as again, they can be filled out by everybody. Sometimes I will just make a note to say that I've seen and read and acknowledged, or there's something that I've had to escalate further, or I've passed something on. And even for additional security reports, so our campus support team, if they've had to attend site, they will write their own report on their own system. So that can allow me to copy their report and just paste it in the notes, and then at least everything is sitting exactly under that one instance. It just allows the whole story to sit in the actual instance. So if there's any questions or queries, you know that everything's there. Another useful tool that we use as well is tasks. So from this, you can allocate tasks to various members of the team. So you can allocate tasks to everyone really. But we use this a lot with our disciplinary. So the warden or myself will allocate a task to our reception supervisor, who gets in contact with the students, to ask to make a meeting with the students, or to send them a fine letter, or we'll send a task to the residential advisors and ask them to do a little check-in chat, and then we ask them to pop a little note on once they've done the check-in chat, so that we know that someone's been, if it's a little incident and someone just needs to be checked up on the next day, that someone has been checked in, they've popped a little note on, the task has been there. You can allocate it to the whole entire team, you can allocate it to a specific person. And when you do allocate it to a person, it comes up again in your emails. So you get an automated email to say that a task has been allocated to you, and it'll tell you the category and it'll tell you the description, and that will say, can you please go and do a check-in chat on X, Y, and Z students and report back, or can you put an appointment through? And then I can also see tasks that have been allocated. So I get an automated email if any tasks are allocated to an instance that is sitting under one of my teams. So it's useful for me to see, so I know I don't have to intervene. So if the warden has already responded and asked someone to do a task, then it's already done. And again, it stops that whole email response. Can you do this? Oh, she's already asked me to do this. I've already done this. So it is quite useful that you can see. You can go on in the actual incident and you can see what tasks have been allocated and how many tasks. And again, obviously notes and follow-ups. You can also arrange appointments for the students. So you can send an appointment date and time to the student to say, can you come and see me at this date and time? So you can arrange appointments directly through them, giving the student the time and date for an appointment. And then, as Katie said, we do this a lot for outcomes for our disciplinary. So we'll arrange disciplinary appointments, and then we have outcomes for our disciplinary. So we will have any correspondence that has happened to the students, so any letters that have been sent, any fines that have been allocated, can all then be added onto their account. So just a PDF added on, and then it sits under that incident. You can also click into the students individually, so you can allocate certain fines to certain people. So we can say this person was involved, this person wasn't involved, and it means that you can break it down, and then that sits in their student portfolio. So when you click on a student's information, you can click in their wellbeing tab, and it will give them a list of incidents they've been involved in. You can also then see what incidents they've actually been fined for, so you can get a good picture of a certain student. And it builds up a really, really good case. And then it allows us to report on each one. And it's really useful for obviously case management, and if we have any issues on site. So if we have a big crisis with a student, we can straight away go on to student life. In the incident tab, you can click in the student ID number, you can click in the surname, first name, room number, you can do a search any which way that you can, and that will pull up the student's profile. And then in the student profile, you can see, as I say, all the incidents they've been involved in. And we're currently setting up a profile that you can then download these into a document. So that's currently, correct me if I'm wrong, in in working plans at the minute. So that this will allow us to pick things that we need to download. So this will be useful for risk assessment meetings, if we need to pass information as a whole onto certain people within the university, to academic departments, maybe to the advice and guidance team or the international team to flag up any concerns that we do have. It's just really useful that it's all really there in one place. So yeah, I think pretty much it. Yeah. So it allows it, yeah. So it's a really good, useful tool that has been put together for us. And as I say, it streamlines everything that we're doing. It ensures that everyone's working exactly the same, and that we can monitor and maintain all of the students' profiles together. So yes, that is my day-to-day in the life of student life.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Steph and Katie, for sharing how this really impacts both of your jobs and your teams as well. I think there's no better people really to share how you're using the product than yourselves. And for the sake of this webinar, we've also included just a bit more around those data and insights that you've both mentioned. So we can show what you're seeing to help you kind of look at those trends and analytics and numbers that you've also mentioned as well. So this is just an example of one of our dashboards. This is kind of demo data, so this would be a lot more if it was being used on a day-to-day basis. But you can monitor anything from your interactions, see these trends, compare them across your different academic years, and you can access those totals really easily. And you can further break down data as well. So where we spoke right at the start, and where Katie alluded to those 800 incidents they tracked in 2021 to 2022, they can further break that down into different demographic groups as well, be that course, gender, ethnicity, area. So they can really break those down too. But thank you so much both. That was absolutely brilliant to hear your side of the product as well. Just to finish up before we begin Q&A, after all the content that we've presented today, it would be really useful to hear which of these poll options that should be popping in the chat, hopefully, as I speak, is a key priority for you to further improve your student wellbeing management at your institution. As we said, we understand there's a lot of complexities, so it should be great to gain that insight into what you are prioritising yourselves at your university too. So we're going to wrap up there today. We will open to Q&A, and there's some details on the screen now as well. I'm just going to have to exit my screen share just so I can see the details of the chat. If there is any questions, or if you want to pop their hands up and ask a question, please feel free.
I've got a question, Ali.
Go on, Paula.
I love Student Life, massive advocate. We use it and it's brilliant. But I don't get notifications when I put new things on. So can someone either tell me now or tell me afterwards how I set that up? Because we just get surprises when we log on. So
absolutely. No, we can absolutely pick that up.
We don't want surprises. There's enough surprises in our team. Brilliant. We'll pick that up after if you don't mind, because that sounds so good to have that kind of constant reaction to what's going on and keeping on top of things. So that would be brilliant. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll drop you an email after, no problem. any other questions? I can see in the chat we've got our poll results. Thank you for completing those. That's great. Wonderful. Well, if there's no questions, obviously feel free to get in touch if you've got any further follow-up questions after this, or if you just want to have a general chat. Myself and Katie would both be open to further conversations if anyone wants to hear more. And just thank you so much for your time today, for joining us. It's been great to speak to you all. So thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for taking the lead on the call today and the team at Kinetic. What we will do is that we will share a copy of the recording of this session with the members afterwards. It will be in the resources area. And obviously feel free to reach out to Ali and the team if you have any questions about the product. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much, everybody.